The restaurant was packed, the noise almost deafening. Ariel moved quickly, trying to keep up, but her shoulders were heavy, her smile fake. Behind the break room door, she broke down. She didn't know it, but the man she'd served earlier wasn't just a customer, he was the CEO, and he'd been watching. The restaurant was buzzing with the usual Friday night rush. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling steaks, the sound of laughter, and the constant hum of orders being called out from the kitchen. Waitstaff moved swiftly, like they were part of a well-oiled machine, but to Ariel it all felt like a blur. She could barely keep up. Her feet ached, her back was sore, and her mind was foggy from the long hours of running around trying to meet every expectation. It didn't matter how hard she worked or how fast she moved. It never felt like it was enough. Every mistake, no matter how small, was met with a sharp reprimand from Brent, the manager. Ariel had been working at the restaurant for over a year, but tonight felt different. Tonight, it felt like the weight of everything she had been holding inside for so long was finally about to crush her. As she weaved through the crowded dining area, her eyes landed on Brent. He was talking to a couple at table 7, his arms crossed, face set in a scowl as he gave them instructions on how to properly enjoy the meal. Ariel tried to ignore the way he made her feel like she was walking on eggshells every time she passed by. It was just a part of the job now. Avoid the confrontation, keep your head down, and get through the night. But then everything changed. Ariel was on her way to the bar to pick up a drink order when she accidentally knocked over a glass. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it was the first time it felt like it would be the end of her. The glass hit the floor with a sharp clink, and before she could even bend down to pick it up, she heard that voice. "Are you serious?" Brent's voice echoed across the room, loud and sharp. She froze. The customers at nearby tables turned their heads, but Ariel couldn't even bring herself to make eye contact with them. She felt her cheeks flush as Brent walked over, his footsteps heavy on the tile. His gaze was cold, calculating. "What the hell is wrong with you? You can't even carry a glass? You're making us look bad out there," Brent continued, his voice rising. He didn't care about the other servers, the cooks, or the staff. He cared about how he looked and how well his little kingdom operated. Ariel swallowed hard, trying to keep the tears from welling up in her eyes. But they came anyway, hot and stinging, threatening to spill over. She could feel the weight of every hour she had worked for the past year, every shift where she gave it her all only to be met with more pressure, more expectations. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible, hoping he would just let it go. Brent sneered, not even bothering to look around. "Sorry doesn't cut it. If you keep this up, you won't have a job here anymore." Ariel's heart sank. She had heard it before. Threats, criticism, the constant feeling that no matter how hard she worked, it wasn't enough. She bit her lip and nodded, desperate to make it through the rest of the shift. But something in her snapped. She didn't say anything else to Brent. She didn't argue, didn't beg him to understand. She just walked away, heading toward the break room, her legs feeling like lead. She didn't want to deal with the customers, the other staff, or even herself. She needed a moment to breathe, to feel like she wasn't suffocating under the weight of this job. The break room door clicked shut behind her, and for a few moments, she just stood there in silence. The noise of the restaurant faded, replaced by the sound of her own breathing, shaky and uneven. She sank down against the wall, her back pressing against the cool metal of the lockers. And then, finally, she let go. Tears fell freely now, and Ariel didn't try to stop them. She couldn't. The anger, the frustration, the exhaustion, it all came rushing out in a wave that left her feeling empty. It wasn't just about the glass. It wasn't just about Brent. It was about everything. The endless demands, the feeling that she was invisible, that no matter how hard she tried, It would never be enough. A knock at the door startled her. Ariel quickly wiped her face, trying to pull herself together. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, didn't want to show weakness. But the knock came again, this time louder, more insistent. "Hey, you okay in there?" Tasha's voice came through the door, soft but concerned. Ariel paused, holding her breath for a moment. She didn't want to admit how much she was struggling, how close she was to losing it all. But Tasha had been her co-worker for months, and Tasha knew her too well to let this go. "I'm fine," Ariel said quickly, trying to sound more composed than she felt. But Tasha didn't buy it. Ariel could hear her footsteps as she pushed the door open, and without saying a word, Tasha came in and sat down next to her. "I know you're not," Tasha said, her voice low and understanding. "I know what's been going on. You've been carrying this weight for too long, Ariel. You can't keep it all in." Ariel didn't answer. She didn't have the words. She just sat there, her hands trembling, feeling like she might collapse under the weight of it all. Tasha reached out and placed a hand on Ariel's arm, squeezing it gently. "Listen, I get it. It's hard. Brent is a jerk, but he's not worth this. None of this is worth losing yourself over." Ariel closed her eyes, her head dropping into her hands. She didn't want to hear it, didn't want to hear that she could just walk away from it. She didn't have the luxury to quit. She needed this job. She couldn't afford to lose it. "I don't know what to do anymore," Ariel whispered. "I feel like I'm drowning." Tasha was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was full of something close to sadness, something Ariel had never heard from her before. "You're not drowning, Ariel. But you need to take a step back. You can't keep going like this. You deserve better than this." Ariel didn't answer. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know if there was even anything left to say. Ariel sat in the break room for a while, just letting the silence wash over her. The weight of the night was still pressing on her chest, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't have to keep up appearances. She didn't have to pretend to be fine. Her head was starting to clear, but it wasn't enough. The constant cycle of pressure, exhaustion, and fear was eating at her. She had worked hard for over a year in this place, and yet it never felt like she was moving forward. Every day, the same faces, the same routine, the same exhausted, empty feeling. Nothing changed. She stood up slowly, wiping her face again and pushing the thoughts away for a moment. She needed to get back to work. The shift wasn't over, and there were still people waiting to be served. She didn't have the luxury of time to dwell on how badly she felt. As she opened the door to step back into the chaos of the restaurant, she caught sight of him again. The man who had been sitting in the corner booth. He was still there, quietly watching the room as if he were a ghost. Ariel couldn't place it, but there was something different about him. He didn't seem to fit in with the usual crowd. The way he carried himself, the stillness in his gaze, it was as if he was observing everything without actually participating. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. He was just another customer, but something nagged at her as she walked by. There was an air of authority about him, something subtle that made her pause, if only for a moment. She quickly turned her attention back to her work, focusing on the tables, the orders, the task at hand. It wasn't the time to get distracted by a strange feeling. Julian Merritt had been watching for hours, quietly taking in everything that was happening around him. He wasn't here as a customer. He wasn't here to eat or drink. He was here to see the truth. The truth about what was really going on in his restaurants. The truth that no one saw behind the polished walls, the uniforms, the smiling faces of the servers. He had spent years building his restaurant chain on a foundation of values, respect, dignity, teamwork. But as he sat here, he was starting to wonder if anyone had even remembered those values. It wasn't just the employees who were tired. It was the whole system. The system that valued efficiency over compassion, profit over people. He had watched for hours as Ariel had rushed from table to table, barely managing to keep up with the demands. He had seen the way Brent barked orders at the staff, treating them like tools instead of humans. Julian wasn't blind. He had always known that running a business meant making hard decisions, cutting costs, and maintaining standards. But what he hadn't realized was how far they had strayed from the initial vision. Somewhere along the way, they had lost sight of the people who were the backbone of it all, the employees, the ones who made the magic happen every single day. Ariel's breakdown, though hidden from most, hadn't gone unnoticed by him. He had seen it, how she tried to hold herself together, how she moved through the restaurant like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. He couldn't let that go unnoticed. Not anymore. He had seen enough. Brent was still in his office, pacing back and forth, barking at the kitchen staff, trying to put out fires. He was stressed, his face flushed, his hands clenched in fists as he shouted at the cooks for taking too long to plate the orders. He had no idea what was coming. Julian stood up from his booth, adjusting the hoodie he wore, his mind set on one thing: action. It was time for him to stop hiding in the shadows. He walked with purpose toward the back of the restaurant, the space between him and the employees almost palpable. No one stopped him. No one questioned the quiet man who had been sitting in the corner for hours. But as he walked past the bar and toward the hallway that led to the manager's office, something in the air shifted. Ariel, still carrying the weight of her shift, was walking past the back hall when she saw him. For a split second, she felt like he was walking straight toward her. Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't explain why, but the way he moved, the quiet intensity, everything about him felt different. She quickly turned her head, not wanting to seem too obvious, but Julian's presence lingered in her mind. Julian knocked once on Brent's office door, his knuckles tapping the wood in a way that echoed too loudly in the quiet hallway. Brent, who had been muttering to himself about the next set of orders, looked up in surprise. He had not expected anyone, especially not someone dressed like a customer. "Can I help you?" Brent asked, his voice a little defensive. It wasn't often that anyone came to speak to him, especially not without some sort of agenda. Julian didn't waste any time. "I'm Julian Merritt," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I own this place." Brent froze. He blinked a couple of times, taking in the man standing before him. Julian's expression was neutral, but the weight behind his words hit Brent like a truck. The sudden realization washed over him. His throat went dry, and for the first time in a long while he felt small. "You... what?" Brent stammered, the arrogance in his posture quickly turning to confusion. "I'm the owner, and I've been watching," Julian said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "I've been watching how this place runs, how you treat your staff, and I've seen enough." Brent's eyes darted around, trying to recover, but it was clear he wasn't used to being caught off guard like this. "I don't know what you think you saw, but Brent began, but Julian raised a hand, cutting him off. "I saw employees being pushed to their limits, struggling under pressure because you make them feel like they don't matter. I saw a culture of fear, not respect. I saw people who are running on empty, doing their best just to stay afloat." Brent's jaw clenched. "I'm doing my job. We can't afford mistakes in this business. I'm keeping things running." "No," Julian said firmly. "You're not keeping anything running. You're breaking it down, piece by piece." The tension in the room was thick, but Julian's voice didn't waver. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to make a point. "I'm giving you one chance to fix this, to be the leader you're supposed to be. If not, I'll fix it for you." Brent's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, he almost didn't know how to respond. The last thing he had expected was to be confronted by someone he didn't recognize, and even worse, someone who claimed to be the owner of the entire restaurant chain. He had been running this place for so long, managing it under his own terms. Now, this man, Julian, was in his office, questioning everything he had worked to establish. "I'm doing my best here," Brent muttered, trying to salvage the situation. "The place has been busy. We're understaffed. You don't understand." "No, you don't understand," Julian interrupted, his voice calm but unyielding. "You're not in charge of this restaurant anymore. You've lost control of what matters." Brent's face flushed red. His instinct was to fight back, to shout, to defend himself. He had been doing this job for years. He knew what was best. But something in Julian's eyes, a quiet authority, made him pause. The words that had worked on the other employees, his sharp tongue, his harsh demands, had no effect here. Julian's gaze softened, but only slightly. He wasn't here to yell, to embarrass Brent in front of everyone, but he was here to make a point. "You've created a culture of fear, Brent. Not just among the servers, but in every corner of this restaurant. When the staff is afraid to make a mistake, that's when everything starts to fall apart. It's not about mistakes. It's about respect, dignity, and feeling like you belong." Brent shifted uncomfortably, glancing out the window toward the busy dining room. The hum of activity, the sounds of plates clinking, the chatter of customers. It all seemed distant now, like it didn't belong to him anymore. The realization crept in slowly, a gnawing feeling that maybe Julian was right. Maybe he had been too focused on keeping everything running his way, at the expense of the people who kept it going. "I've done what I had to do," Brent said, his voice quieter now. It was almost as though he was trying to convince himself more than Julian. "I've had to push them to meet the standards, to perform." Julian took a slow step forward, his voice still steady but carrying an undeniable weight. "People are not machines, Brent. They're not robots. They're human beings. And you've forgotten that." The silence in the room stretched for a moment. The words hung heavy, and for the first time, Brent felt a flicker of doubt. Could it be true? Had he been so caught up in the system, in the results, that he had lost sight of the very people who made everything possible? Meanwhile, on the floor, Ariel continued to move through the restaurant, her body aching with exhaustion. She didn't notice it at first, but she felt a shift in the air. Something was different. The usual tension, the one that had followed her every step for so long, was gone. It wasn't that the restaurant had suddenly become quiet or calm. It was more like a subtle change, an undercurrent of something she couldn't quite put her finger on. As she passed the bar, she caught sight of Brent, still in his office, his back turned toward her. His usual booming voice was absent, replaced by something softer, quieter. It was strange. It was like he wasn't the same man she had been working under all this time. Then her eyes flicked to Julian. He was moving with purpose now, walking through the restaurant, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged here. Ariel's mind raced. Could it be? Was this man the one? The owner? She caught herself just before the thought consumed her. She couldn't afford to think too much about it right now. There was too much to do. She focused on the table in front of her, trying to shake the feeling of being watched, of things slowly shifting around her in a way she couldn't understand. Back in Brent's office, the tension had reached a breaking point. Julian stood in front of Brent, his calm demeanor now carrying a sense of finality. Brent looked like he had been cornered, unsure of how to respond. "You have one chance, Brent," Julian said, his voice lower now, serious. "You can start treating your staff like people, or you can pack your things and leave. I'm not here to run this place with an iron fist, but I will not stand by and let this continue." Brent opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in a long while, he felt small, powerless in a way he never had before. His pride had always been his shield, but now it was starting to feel more like a burden. "I don't want to fire you," Julian continued, "but you need to understand something. This isn't just about making a profit. This is about building something people want to be a part of. If that's not what you're here for, then you're in the wrong place." Brent stood there, his arms stiff at his sides, his mind racing. He was trapped in his own fear of losing control, fear of being exposed for the way he'd been running things. And in that moment, he realized something that chilled him. Julian wasn't like any other owner he'd ever encountered. Julian looked at him for a long moment, his expression still calm but unyielding. "I'm going to give you a second chance. But I'm not here to babysit, Brent. You either rise to the occasion or you step aside. The choice is yours." With that, Julian turned and walked out of the office, leaving Brent standing there in stunned silence. Ariel stood frozen at the bar, trying to process everything. She had seen the confrontation, and though she couldn't hear the words, she knew something had shifted. She wasn't sure what it meant for her or the rest of the staff, but the atmosphere in the restaurant was different now. Less oppressive, more hopeful? Her mind raced, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of something unfamiliar, something that had been absent for too long. Could things really change? The hours passed, but the usual tension never returned. It was like something had shifted in the very air of the restaurant. Ariel moved between the tables, but this time it felt different, lighter. She wasn't sure if it was just her imagination or if something had actually changed, but there was a subtle shift she couldn't ignore. She glanced at Brent every now and then as he moved about the restaurant. He was still barking orders, but there was something off about his usual demeanor. His movements were quicker, sharper, as if he was on edge, but not in the way he usually was. There was no frustration, no simmering anger. It was like he was trying to keep a low profile, doing his job but not with the usual harshness that had been a part of the restaurant's culture for so long. It made Ariel uneasy. Was it for real? She couldn't shake the feeling that something big had happened behind the scenes, something that was going to affect all of them, for better or for worse. Meanwhile, Julian was sitting at the far end of the bar, quietly observing. He had been in and out of the restaurant throughout the evening, watching, listening, taking mental notes of everything that was going on. He didn't need to make a grand speech to make things change. What he needed was for the staff to feel seen, for them to understand that they were more than just workers. They were the heart of the business. And in that moment, as he observed the atmosphere, he felt like they were starting to get it. Ariel caught his eye across the room, and for a moment, their gazes locked. There was no words exchanged, but somehow the look she gave him was enough. He saw it in her eyes, the weariness, the exhaustion, the relief that wasn't fully realized yet, but it was there. She gave him a slight nod before turning away to attend to another customer. Julian couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He hadn't seen all of it yet, the full picture of how things would unfold, but he knew that the beginning had started tonight. The moment when respect started flowing again, instead of fear. As the night wound down, something strange happened. Brent walked through the dining room, a tray of dirty glasses in his hands, his posture straighter than it had been all night. He didn't bark at anyone. He didn't make snide comments about mistakes. Instead, he walked past Ariel's station, hesitated, and then turned back toward her. "Hey, Ariel," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Ariel looked up, surprised. She had almost forgotten he was there, so consumed in the odd new atmosphere of the restaurant. "Yeah? I I know things haven't been great," Brent started, and Ariel couldn't believe her ears. She had never heard him speak this way before. "I'm sorry if I've been hard on you. On all of you." She blinked, not sure if she had heard him right. What do you mean? He shifted awkwardly, avoiding her gaze. I've been pushing too hard, and I realize that. It's not, it's not right. Ariel didn't know what to say. She could feel her chest tighten, unsure of whether she should believe him. Was this some kind of trick? A desperate attempt to keep his position? But then, something in his expression made her pause. He wasn't acting like the Brent she had known for the past year. This was different. I've been given a warning, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't keep running this place the way I have. Things have to change. And they will. Ariel stared at him for a moment longer, still processing what he was saying. Thanks for saying that, she finally muttered, unsure of how else to respond. Brent gave a stiff nod and walked off, back to his office, leaving Ariel standing there, more confused than ever. Later that night, after the last customers had left, the entire staff gathered in the break room. Julian had called for a quick meeting, something that was rare in the restaurant. As the employees trickled in, there was a nervous energy in the air. No one knew what to expect. Were they in trouble? Had they been caught slacking off? But as Julian walked into the room, there was a calm about him. He didn't rush to speak. He just stood there for a moment, letting the staff feel his presence before he said anything. Look, I know this has been a tough night, he started, his voice carrying easily in the small room. It's been a tough few months, probably longer than that. But I want to make something clear. He paused for a moment, making sure everyone's eyes were on him. I'm here because I believe in this restaurant, and I believe in all of you. But things haven't been going the way they should. There's been too much pressure, too much fear, and that's not how we build a great place to work. It's not how we treat the people who make this place what it is. The room was silent, everyone hanging on to his every word. I'm going to make sure this restaurant is a place where you feel respected, Julian continued. I'm going to make sure you have what you need to do your jobs well and feel like you're part of something. And if anyone feels like they're being treated unfairly, I want you to tell me. No one here should feel like Ariel did tonight. No one. Ariel, standing in the back of the room, felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't sure what Julian had done, what had happened between him and Brent, but she could already feel the weight starting to lift. It wasn't all gone, but it was different. It was a beginning. As the meeting ended and everyone filed out of the break room, Ariel caught Julian's eye once more. This time, she didn't look away. She offered him a small smile, and he returned it with a nod. No words were exchanged, but there was an understanding between them, a recognition that things were changing. Ariel walked out into the main dining area, the hum of the restaurant now feeling a little warmer, a little more hopeful. She wasn't sure if everything was going to be perfect from here on out. She wasn't sure if Brent would change overnight or if the restaurant's culture would shift that quickly. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. And that was enough for now. The next few days were quieter. The usual rush of customers, the chatter of the kitchen, the sound of glasses clinking. It was still all there. But it felt different. Like there was an unspoken understanding among the staff that things were shifting. Ariel wasn't sure what to make of it at first. There was still a palpable tension whenever Brent passed by, but it wasn't the same kind of tension. He no longer barked orders. He no longer loomed over them, expecting perfection at every turn. Instead, he was quieter, less of a presence, almost like he was waiting for something. Ariel wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely, but it was clear that he wasn't the same as he had been before, and that was a relief. But the real change wasn't in Brent. It wasn't in the way he acted. It was in the way everyone else acted. The staff moved with more purpose, more confidence. They didn't seem so afraid to make a mistake anymore. The little things started to shift. The way they communicated, the way they smiled at each other, the way the tension in the air started to dissipate. Even Tasha, who had always been so grounded, seemed to carry herself differently. There was a small spark in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. And Ariel, well, for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a machine. She felt like a part of the team, a person who mattered. One evening, after the dinner rush had calmed down, Julian came in again. This time, he didn't just sit quietly at a booth. He walked straight through the restaurant, his eyes scanning the floor. He greeted a few of the staff with a nod, but instead of hovering over anyone, he did something that felt surprisingly normal. He got up to the bar, ordered a drink, and sat down in the corner, watching the dynamics of his restaurant with a casual interest. Ariel noticed him again. She had seen him the day after the meeting, walking around like he owned the place, which, of course, he did. But this time, there was something different in the air. Julian wasn't just there anymore. He had become part of the atmosphere, like a quiet force that worked behind the scenes to make everything run smoothly.